All right, ready? Hello and welcome to Restore Childhood. My name is Stephanie Edmonds, and I am joined today by Angel San Martin, a teacher from Florida who has made quite the splash with his video, which now has garnered just shy of 373,000 views on X, formerly known as Twitter, declaring that he is no longer comfortable in the classroom because he's being forced to teach more ideology than reading, writing, American history. So, Angel, thank you for joining Natalia and I here today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and I just want to remind everybody before we get started, make sure you hit that like button. If you're new, welcome. Please subscribe to the channel and check out our other videos. And you can find out more about what we do over at restorechildhood.com. So, Angel, first, tell us just a little bit more about yourself as a teacher and why did you make this video? It's about 5 minutes long, and you are very, calmly and clearly going through your thought process, but it also just seems sudden, based on your use. You had been anonymous up till this time, and this was sort of your coming out video, if you will. So tell us a little bit about the background there and what made you take this bold action.
Oh goodness, so much went into it. I don't know. I keep up with like the culture. Now we call it the culture war. What happens in pop culture? What happens in politics? I really keep up with that. And I don't know. I just started seeing a, a decline. I remember when I started teaching, when I first was a classroom teacher 7 years ago, I started the class every year, like at the beginning of the year, saying, the United States is the greatest country in the world. Nothing else comes close. And then this last year, I was like, huh, things are really different. And I don't know, I just got annoyed, I guess. And then that's the thing. I'm from Florida, and according to, you know, how do I say, according to our governor, according to people from Florida, we're protected from this, woke ideology, this pride ideology that's happening in schools. And I mean, no, it's creeping in sort of everywhere. And I don't know. I was just thinking, why aren't people saying anything about this? And more importantly, why are we in a situation where if you have one ideology, you can talk about it as much as you want, be as extreme and crazy, and bring in the strangest books. But if I say, hey, I like the First Amendment, I'm evil. Like, that's not okay. And considering that the United States is based on a very special set of ideas, that's not an ethno state and something like that, that's something that should be preserved. And I don't know, I was raised with the idea that people should be allowed to express their opinions. That's when my family came here. And I don't know, it just reached a point where I was just looking around, and I I don't know, it took me like 12, 15 hours to come up with the video. And it was just a culmination of years and years of just seeing everything sort of slowly and then quickly decline around me. I don't know.
Yeah, so I want to know some more specifics. I know Natalia wants to talk to you about where you came from and your background and sort of your family history that might have given you the ability to detect this and some of the courage you had to step up. But what are some of the things that you're actually seeing or have seen in the classroom over the years sort of sneak in, whether it's a specific book or curriculum or things that people were saying or doing?
Well, the two obvious things has been the big push for social emotional learning, which I just consider it a backdoor for whatever ideology with empathy the teachers want to come up with. And from a systemic perspective, the removal of the sex of students in schools.
And
And
that's even, you're saying that's even happening down in Florida
that
there.
was yeah, that was done at I can't say for the entire state, but that was definitely done at a district level. So that was that was that was the most shocking thing. And in addition to that, one of the years there was a push to teach pillars of virtue. And I know this whole, like, there's this pervasive idea in the teaching profession that parents sort of failed the kids, and it's our job to sort of, the idea of it takes a village, and the teachers are that village. That's what the school system is, and we're going to help raise the kids, and then eventually we're going to raise the kids. The thing that I saw, hold on, let me
That's fine.
backtrack. The gender stuff, the first pillar was pride. Like, I was supposed to teach my students how pride was something good.
Pride,
Uh-uh.
like pride in yourself. What does pride mean?
It was so nebulous. It was just pride, and we had to define it. And I'm thinking, like, okay, so like, pride in what? Do you want to speak the general pride? Because I'm Hispanic, and it's like, okay, I'm happy I'm Hispanic, but I also know that it was sort of random chance that I was born to the parents I was born to. I could have been born to white parents. I could have been born to black parents. I just happened to be born to a Cuban dad and a Chilean mom. And okay, that's cool. Great. But I also question, like, when I was born into being Hispanic, what grand thing did I do to advance my culture? Nothing, sort of. I don't know. I sort of don't understand that, because in my mind, pride in yourself, there's a very thin line between having pride in your race and your culture, and then saying that your race and culture is better than someone else's. It's a very slippery slope, in my opinion.
And so you teach social studies, and you said mostly American history. So where was this social emotional learning coming into play, or supposed to come into play? Was it in your history classroom? Is there something else going on?
I wasn't directly pushed to teach it. As long as you're teaching the standards, for the most part, you're generally okay. But the thing about standards is some of them are purposely vague, so you can fit whatever kind of ideology you want in that. And that's sort of always been true since teaching was a thing. But it's mostly been from the outside. It's been sort of the programs, the after school and inter-school programs, a lot of push from the counselors and things like that. Like, I'll join this session for this, module on having empathy or something like that. And it was a lot of just not directly in my classroom, mostly because I just refused to teach it. And if it would have come to, you have to teach this, I'm like, okay, so you're telling me what to teach, and then that would have been a different route altogether. But my whole thing as a teacher is know if someone's lying to you, sort of thing. Like, I just ask the questions. I don't want to give the answers. I'm just like, hey, there's this weird paradox here. Can you explain it? This is weird. I just want to point that out. And that exists pretty much everywhere. That's my whole ethos as a teacher. But like I said, a lot of it was just coming from, I guess, the counselor realm for the most part.
So does that mean that the parents would be completely unaware about what was happening? Because it's kind of like the soft parts of school that don't.
I mean, honestly, I didn't know a lot about that either, because I was just too worried about teaching my class. I hate interruptions. Like, oh, we're having this, I don't know, luncheon or something. It's going to take 4 hours. And it's like, I just want to teach my class, please. There's always so many things that get in the way of teaching in general, all these activities and sports and things like that. I mean, I understand the sports, but part of this new movement is just, there's an additional push to continue separating kids from the classroom and then engage in sort of different activities while school is happening.
So were other I imagine that you talked to other teachers about this. Were you unique in kind of going like, hold on a minute, this is not really.
No, definitely not unique.
So other teachers
are they speaking out in the same way, or is it just sort of one of those things where it's like grumbles, but nobody's going to say anything?
There wasn't, like I said, there wasn't really big overt pushes and programs, but it was just little things that we sort of have to accept, like sort of rule changes from the district. And we have no real choice in the matter. It's kind of like, oh, the district is making us do this. Oh, the district decided to do that. And we're like, all right, I guess we have no choice.
Right.
because already as charter schools, the district doesn't like charter schools. So, um,
Yeah,
but I
in our
mean,
district, I know we got a diversity, equity, and inclusion policy, for example.
hmm,
And so a lot of those things aren't overt and in your face, but if you start looking at small little changes. But I do know, for example, the when my beginning of my last year, right before I got fired for other reasons, teachers in New York City were getting ready to give some social emotional learning. It had like 30 questions,
The
and
DESA, the DESA
there
screener.
you go. And I, as a social studies teacher, would have had a certain number of kids who I was responsible for giving this exam to, or giving
oh,
this whatever survey to, of their social emotional readiness. I don't know the details, but so there's like both those like sort of things that you kind of have to be paying attention to get to, and then there's these super overt things. I don't know if you had anything like that.
I no. I mean, there were. I mean, there's always been attempts at data collection and things like that. But I maybe it was because I didn't have access to them, because it's like, oh, give these links to students. It only works for students, kind of thing, so they can finish
Mm,
the survey at home. So I never really looked into them. Um, so, but I do know they existed, and yeah, they're just becoming more common.
yeah.
But I guess in my situation is, since we have since a lot of schools have a pretty decent online platform, they'll just directly email the students and say, oh, you have to do this sort of thing now, and just bypass the teachers. So
Mm,
Yeah, the DEI policy seems to be a standard now across the country. I was just talking to a friend in California, in Carlsbad actually, who said that they have a new DEI policy that's been handed down to them, and that it includes questions that employers in the school system are required to ask potential employees about like their history in social justice, or and so I mean, until they're challenged in court. I mean, he's a lawyer, so he was like, this is illegal, it needs to be challenged in court. But as we all know, that takes a while. In the meantime, the types of employees they bring in, would
mm,
be towing the line, and you get as many in as you can, and you go from there.
this makes sense. No, this makes sense. I was talking to a friend, and they mentioned how they're really pushing the CRT in law school. They're really pushing the equity stuff. They're really pushing the social activism. Hey, that makes sense. Just make all the lawyers into social activists, and then you can't sue the social activists.
Right. Exactly. So, I mean, and that's something Stephanie and I have been working on a documentary now for about a year and a half,
Oh
on
wow.
what happened when schools shut down, and the impact of COVID lockdowns on children and families across the country. And we've spent a considerable amount of time in the Maryland, DC, Virginia area, and in Fairfax County. One of the moms, who's a special education advocate, Deborah Tisler, who we've worked with, interviewed, and tried to support, has talked about how the Fairfax County Public Schools are basically like this, closed system where you can't get a job in that system unless you toe the line and you're willing to go along with all of it. And if you kind of dissent, eventually they weed out these employees. These employees leave, and the people they replace them with are the ones who are willing to go along with it.
Yeah. I That's amazing that you're doing that documentary, because the amount of trauma that's been experienced just by everyone in the United States because of the COVID lockdowns, just because they happened. I don't want to get into the politics or anything, but just experiencing that, and the amount of miseducation that our students have had is something that's has not been talked about, and it would be just the biggest shame if it was just swept under the rug. So this is a wonderful thing that you two are doing, that your group is doing.
We're trying to make sure that the stories remain on record, and that the unions and the politicians who are trying to cover their tracks don't get to write the history books.
right. And this is so important too, though, because it's they're offering the social emotional learning and the equity and the inclusion as the solution. Like, oh, we went through all this trauma, therefore now we need all this new mental health and wraparound services in our community schools. And I in your video, you had a different solution, and it's one that I've also written about with another teacher. Um, what's her name? Steele. Remind me.
Lee.
Yes. Yeah. Me and another teacher, we wrote about the fact that actually the solution is going back to the basics, going back to those high quality academics, direct instruction, making sure our kids can read and do math, know their multiplication tables. Can you speak a little bit to that as well?
So, my biggest complaint about all of this is not even, oh, you're brainwashing kids or you're making them think woo-woo magical stuff. It's just, no, they can't read. They can't do math. They don't know what 2 plus 2 is because we're putting into question what 2 plus 2 even meaningfully means. And I don't, I want to go back to reading books. I want to go back to classical education because that's what worked. That's what led us to, in part, be one of the most successful nations and empires on planet Earth. It's just, can we just go back to that? I don't know. It just seems so basic. We spend so much money on what is it, $14,000 per student, and our scores are going down.
That's nothing.
No, that's like
what we spend up here in New York. Do you know what they spend in New York City on students? They spend like $35,000 per student.
Oh no, that's just like the direct
for special ed.
Yeah, that's just the
like,
direct
whew.
plus, and that's just the average. Yeah. Absolutely, no, it's absolutely wild the amount of money we spend, and we spend it on technology, we spend it on mid-level administrators, we spend it on all of the things except actual training. What upsets me the most is to all the training I've gone to, it's never been on like, hey, let's like engage in these activities so we can become better masters at our subject and share ideas and things like that. It's all like, hey, look at this fun project over here. This is how you can take better data, and it never goes into becoming a better teacher. It's always about something else. I just want to cut all of that training out. I just want to cut all of that out, and then we can invest more money in teachers. That's really the simple part of this. Get rid of DEI, get rid of administrators, and put more emphasis on teachers. I don't know, like I find it difficult to sort of expand upon that because it's just, I don't know, it's just sort of basic.
Yeah.
Do you think we can retain these teachers? Like, I mean, the problem is, I think the senior teachers are being repelled by this, and they're leaving the workforce. And the young, recent education school grads have been indoctrinated. So do we even have a pool of teachers to pull in?
I would say also, to give a more direct answer, like for years, I've read with my students Animal Farm. We've seen The Matrix. It's just those sort of, I don't want to say basic things, but kind of, how do I explain this? Considering that a lot of educators are Marxists, they don't show you the negative side of it. They show you the positive side of it. Like what I find super interesting when it comes to world history is, we see why the fascists are wrong. We see the evils of capitalism. But socialism seems like a good goal. That always seems bizarre. If you want to have an actual exchange of ideas, we need to explain what the advantages and disadvantages of everything. And how do I say, I don't want to say present all sides of something, but be more balanced in our approach to things. There are evils to communism. There are evils to capitalism. Can we discuss them in a good faith manner? And I think that's part of it too, in a good faith manner, because there's so many teachers, you see them on TikTok. They're like, I confused my kids today about my gender. Yay. It's like, that is not your goal as a teacher. Your goal is to guide this generation of kids because they're lost. Like, they're more lost than we were. Can you imagine being a 13-year-old and then going into your phone during the pandemic and hopping on TikTok and seeing, like, I don't know, a stupid challenge? And you're like, what? Or seeing someone as an adult telling you crazy things that deep down they're wrong, but you can't talk to anyone about it. I don't know. Our job as adults should be like, wow, when I was growing up, I remember I was 17, I got technology and it was very weird. And but we just throw them into sort of the wolves. We just add more confusion onto that in the
Yeah.
classroom.
Well,
So
that's why I do think though that I do think that there is hope. And I think things like what we're trying to do here at Restore Childhood, and you told us about a book, or really more of like a guidebook of practical ways to identify and combat these things. But first, I kind of wanted to talk a little bit more about your background. And this is a discussion Natalia and I have all the time. We're like, what are the commonalities that people who are sort of able to like recognize this, call this out, and fight back? What gives us that ability? And I think you guys both have the immigrant experience in common. So I'd love for you guys to talk about that a little bit.
Well, my background, I was born in the United States. Let's see, I think about it was less than 5 years after my mom got here. Um, she met my father in Miami, and then essentially I came from that. My dad escaped Cuba and not just my dad, my family on my dad's side escaped Cuba, and they sort of split. Some of them went to Hawaii, some of them went to Los Angeles, and most of them went to Miami. And my dad was part of the group that stayed in Miami. And what's so crazy is my father and my grandmother experienced communism, and they told me about the stories. They told me about the things that happened, and I was like, that's crazy. That'll never happen in the United States. And then 20 years later, it's happening so much worse than my dad told me it would, and it just boggles my mind. Like, I should know this. I was raised with these stories, and even then, it just caught me by surprise. So my dad fled left wing authoritarianism. My mom fled. Well, she experienced right wing authoritarianism, but the reason she left was because she needed to pass a super advanced. She needed to be overqualified to be a PE teacher. She needed sort of like microbiology to teach physical education. She's like, this is stupid. I'd rather start from nothing. I'd rather start off from at level one in another country, not knowing the language, not knowing anything, because I can actually succeed and rise to something and progress there as opposed to where I am here. So she just left. So it might be that both sides of at least my mom and my father, both have this rebellious attitude of, hey, I don't like this and I'm going to call it out. I don't know.
Well, also the stories, as a Jew, like that's a big part of our religion, is telling stories and passing on the knowledge that way. So I certainly think it's your parents relaying those stories to you is an important aspect.
It can also be focusing on more of like, hey, look at the long term. Don't just see what's right in front of you. What does this news story imply for the future? Like, oh, the Ukrainian war. Okay, what does this imply? Are we seeing escalations, de-escalations? It's sort of not just, it's sort of, like I said, working with the implications. And of course you can be wrong with the implications, but it's better to have that long-term view as opposed to not.
So when did you start to kind of smell authoritarianism in the air? Was it like with COVID, with lockdowns? I mean, I know Florida was spared. If you could talk about what that experience was like, and what where you were red pilled, if that's the right word.
So I know the first thing I noticed was hypocrisy. It was with the Affordable Care Act, and since I'm 36, like that makes me an older millennial. When I graduated, and I had two part-time jobs. I was working in a restaurant and working as a working as a substitute teacher. And when it went into effect, the promise was, oh, you'll get healthcare and things like that. But what actually happened was my hours were cut in half in both of my jobs, and I found myself in a situation where my financial situation was untenable. And what got me out of that was becoming a classroom teacher, and hey, look, I got my healthcare through that route. So it was like, you've been promising me something for years and years, and that actually never happened. Like, I was sold a complete lie. And so that was my first moment of, hey, wait a second, this is really weird. And definitely, definitely COVID was another eye opener too. Just seeing it from the Florida perspective and just seeing how, I guess, how happy governors were at just shutting everything down and like, hey, look, there's a group of teenagers over here. Let's go arrest them and beat them or something. Let's go chase them down as police officers. And it's like, oh, this is never let a crisis go to waste. I've heard this phrase before. I'm seeing it in action. Oh, and I think part of it is we have to break the normalcy bias because, and this goes back to the grandparent thing. If I don't have any connection to anyone who went through the Great Depression, because if I did, or let me say this way: if as a country we had a connection to people who experienced the Great Depression, we would be much more worried about the situation right in front of us because our parents, and our grandparents have essentially lived with unlimited resources. If you're working class or middle class, you really haven't had to worry like people in, second and third world countries, really.
Mm-hmm.
No, I think
Yeah, I mean, the stories my parents tell about, what waiting online for, milk for me when I was a little girl, and empty shelves in the grocery stores, and, the aristocracy, or the top KGB agents, and, the bureaucrats living in luxury, right? So it wasn't
Why do we think this is a good thing? Oh my gosh,
right.
I don't know. It just seems that there's distortions. I mean, just the trans radical ideology. It's a distortion of reality. It's a distortion of what is a man and what is a woman.
Well, it's a nullification of self too. Like whatever you think you were, you're not. So what else aren't you? You're not. You thought
Well,
you were a girl, you're not a girl. You thought you were this, you're not that. It kind of wipes the slate blank.
well, it's a tyranny of self doubt. It creates self doubt in your, and you have no choice but to trust the experts in that situation. So you give up your agency, you give up your independence. And I guess my first principles are I like autonomy as much as possible, bodily autonomy. Um, the ultimate diversity is uh, the diversity of ideas. And oh my gosh. Oh, right. The second one is if you're advocating for something, then you do it first.
mm, yeah.
So
I think another part of it too is they take advantage of just these natural, beautiful phases that children and adolescents, right? And sometimes the beauty is like in the struggle, right? It's
mhm.
you're going through these like intense identity forming experiences, but those can also be some of the most important and beautiful and profound experiences as well. And you are quite young, and that's why your parents are so important, having this loved, trusted person to be there and guide you. I know, like, for example, my son right now, he's very into big cats. Black Panthers is really like what started it off, but
Dude,
lions,
cats are amazing.
yes, tigers, everything. And he convinced me to buy him some cat ears. And it came with a cat tail. It was like a cat ears and cat tail set. And so he's been wearing all black and these cat ears and this cat tail and going around just telling everybody about big cats and occasionally acting like one too. But it's just like he's 7 years old. And sometimes he dresses up like Spider-Man too, or Batman, and I feel like they're taking these really fun, amazing,
Mm.
beautiful stages and like imprinting this whole thing on it that it's just not, you
They're
know?
yeah, they're deconstructing into saying it actually
Right.
means this and that and that. It's like, no, I just like cats right now. And
Yeah.
like
Right.
I think one of the most important things is to just I don't know, I don't want to it might sound just like normalize normal. Like I've had plenty of students come up to me and been like, because puberty is the most uncomfortable, awkward stage to ever exist in humans, and students telling me like, oh, I feel weird in my body, or like I smell, or this and that. I'm like, yeah, okay, that's normal. Like I kept on my phone a picture of me just like 13 years old, just loaded with acne. I looked awful. Oh my gosh. And every time a student was like, oh, I feel better or something like that, I'm like, this is how I looked when I was 13 years old. Do you look as bad? you'll be fine, kid. And they're like, really? Yeah, dude, it's
Right.
normal. Everyone goes through that. Everyone goes through the self-hatred, the self-doubt. Like, am I going to grow up to be a man? Am I going to grow up to be feminine or and like like an ideal girl? Everyone goes through that. So when you say, yeah, dude, that's normal. Don't worry. And like, I'm fine. And most of the people around you
And
are
that's
fine.
it. You move on too, you know. I like how you just sort of like address it like, yeah, that's a thing. Okay, now we're on to the next thing.
But it's like everyone
Versus
experiences, so it's
right.
okay. Like you're not special because you're going through self-doubt. Like, don't be that narcissistic.
Oh,
Everyone else
don't
went
have
through it too.
pride. Don't have
Yeah.
so much pride about your you know, your faults or whatever the thing is.
Or like you
This is
discover a quirk about yourself that no one else has. It's like, okay, I'm pretty sure a lot of people have had that. You're not that special. But
not
like,
original.
I don't want to like beat them down. It's just like, dude, it's okay to just be average and normal in some regards. Like most people are like, they have one or two skills that they excel at, and for the most part, they're just normal people, and that's fine.
And that's why I think that we're really missing out on that multi-generational household like therapy in a way. Like you don't need therapy. Just being around a grandparent and a parent and seeing their interaction and hearing their stories. I used to hear my grandmothers talking about, the war or having to take care of their kids, like when there's nothing to eat or having to escape, the Germans when they invaded Russia. And just hearing about my mother's experiences coming to this country and exposing her to my children as well. It makes them feel like they're part of something and they have a history and they didn't just like start yesterday. But also it doesn't minimize like the trauma of becoming a teenager, but I think, as you said, it normalizes it and it puts it into perspective. And I think like right now where everything is out of perspective, and it's so easy to do that when you're staring into a phone and social media. I mean, that's for adults too, right? I mean, when you look at Facebook and you see other people's vacations, it always looks so perfect. Then you find out like the family like is getting divorced and the kids are miserable, but in the pictures they look perfect and they're in Hawaii. So it's these distortions that I
Mm,
think like it's like an optical illusion, and I think where these kids are living, they're trapped in them.
right.
And I
Especially
just
it's like a
thought,
social media world, right?
how many of these people they're experiencing or they're interacting with are actually people? What if they're bots? Like, what if
Yeah.
30 to 40% of the interactions you've had are bots, and you think people actually talk and sound that way? Ugh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely noticed even my kids when I was teaching, a lot of the communication they did was through text or through Snapchat. And so they're constantly imprinting their own emotions onto this other person, and it's just pretty much a one-way conversation. It's whatever you want the conversation to be, and then that person's having the conversation whatever they want to be, and both of you leave feeling dissatisfied. So that brings us to the book that you are working on, writing, and I think a lot of these ideas feed right into that. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about that and what we can expect from you in the future.
So the basic idea of what I'm writing is, first I want to sort of identify what's going on. This first, give it a name. I don't know what I'm going to call it yet. Like I said, there's so many names: woke, trans radical ideology. It just goes on and on and on. But I guess the goal of what we're seeing right now is to distort reality, is to get you to question things, and instead of going to ask your parents, you should ask the teachers, the professors, the people with degrees, the experts. And I'm not denying that experts contribute a lot to society. They do. But recently we've seen that experts have overplayed their hands, and the idea that they're not driven by greed and money is, no, come on, we're all humans. So, but the most important part of this book is to, I guess, introduce the parent to the strategies that teachers use to separate, to sort of drive a wedge within the family.
Mhm.
Because this is what we're seeing. What we're seeing is kids are adopting these ideologies from their teachers, which is against their parents' ideas, and there's the wedge. and they fall into their echo chambers at school. So they start attributing school to feel good and wonderful things, and home is hell. And we need to reverse that, because home is not hell. And most parents, the vast majority of parents, want the best for their kids. And so the schools are trying to create a safe space. So I want to expose the farce of the safe space that they're creating, and how to exactly counter that. Um, how to create incentives for your child to say, "Hey, mom, I learned this weird thing in school. What do you think?" Without having the fear of, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe they're teaching you that," and then sort of like, don't shoot the messenger kind of thing. Um, and in addition to that, how teachers create a false consensus, and how teachers, and how you can. I did an experiment in my class where basically I had all of my class, and it was the ash line test. So you have one line on one side and three lines on the other, and the reference line which line does it match, A, B, or C? And what I did was, my class said, let's come up with all fake answers. And so whenever a student comes in like with a message or whatever, I ask them, "Hey, can you participate in this thing?" And then we basically give false answers to questions, and we see the reaction in the kid. And you see a physical, sometimes, I don't want to say violent, but like, you see a physical snap, like, what is going on? How is this happening? And what I want to do is sort of take that fear of that false consensus and what to do in that situation, because it makes people very nervous. If you suddenly realize that everyone around you is like, wants to die on this hill of an absurd idea, you have a physical reaction to that. And
I understand what you mean. So they come into this experiment and they're like looking for the right answer. They realize they're being given all the wrong answers, and they're like, whoa, like, what's going on here? Am I wrong? Yeah, am I wrong? And like, is one of these answers right and I'm going crazy, right? It's like gaslighting.
Yeah, it is. It's a simulation at gaslighting. And even when the kids, like, some of the, it's funny, the more disagreeable, the more you misbehave, the more likely you are to buck the system. Maybe that's why schools are the way they are, with the whole sit down, shut up kind of thing. And even when they measured, and they're like, my measurement is correct, your measurement is wrong, and we just go, no, sorry, we don't accept you. You just see how defeated they become. And it's like, how can a kid try to stand up against a teacher with 3 times the age and experience and the authority, and just with the power of just red carding you whenever they want? So the idea is how to push back against it. It's sort of like a peaceful protest, like, oh, that's a crazy idea. Like, as a kid, if you don't like an idea, you say, no, this is wrong. And if the teacher punishes you, then all right, then take the punishment, because now you can take some action. You can say, well, this is harassment. And that's the final part, linking what's happening in schools to the workplace, and say, if you did this in the workplace, you would be fired immediately. So there's only one answer to this: lawfare it is. If you're not going to be nice, if school districts are not going to listen to parents and say, we don't want weird things being taught, then lawfare it is. And that'll be the essential crux of the book, like how to defeat this as an individual parent, and how to retain the most beautiful relationship you have. It's between the parents and the kids. That breaks my heart whenever I see just I hate my parents because it's. I'm like, how can you? You know that they're sacrificing for you right now. Like you're hating them, and they're providing food for you, like right now. Like, how can you say that about your parents? I don't know. It's just being appreciative of the things you have, and we've had so much, we've forgotten that.
Well, that's why all of this is happening, is because there's been too much, right? I mean, it's people are bored. They don't, they don't feel like they're motivated enough. We've just been surrounded by too much. So I think now
there's a crisis of meaning, and there's very little incentive to do the right thing. Most of the incentive that exists is to be a grifter, to sort of do things just for yourself, to set yourself up and your family, and
go along
whatever to everyone
along.
else. Yeah, exactly.
You were saying something earlier when we were talking about Pinochet and how you're concerned about the fact that, like, with the current wave of cultural Marxism or whatever you want to call it, is going to create a backlash. Can you talk about your concerns?
Well, okay. So I only have a low resolution sort of idea on this. Like intuitively, okay. So what we're seeing is the ascendancy of the left, the ascendancy of essentially Marxism. And the enemy of Marxism is fascism. We've seen this almost 100 years ago. And it you can make the argument, well, they're similar, like, oh, the Nazis were socialists. Okay, yes, fine, whatever. You can have that argument. But they generally fight with each other. And Marxism has killed how many tens of millions of people throughout the world because of its failed policies, its redistributive equity, and then the the reactance to left-wing authoritarianism is right-wing authoritarianism, and usually that manifests as an as a fascist ethno state. That's not going to work for me. I'm Hispanic, and what we see it called like Christian nationalism or something like that. And it's like, by Christian you just mean white nationalism. That's what you mean. You're using Christian as a proxy, and I think authoritarians have used religion to push people into fascism and extremism. I don't know. I have a feeling that happened before.
Yeah. I think one way to think about it is in terms of pushing back or the overdoing of the trans agenda to the point where we're having drag story hours, right, for kids.
I never understood that.
Yeah, the overreaction to that then might be, well, gay rights, all the work that we've done to achieve parity under the law for gay people could be undone because, well, anything that has to do with the LGBTQ, all that, instead of separating and saying, well, okay, no, actually, like the LG, that's like something different than all this like T
that's
right.
What you're
So
seeing.
that's what I hope, that there's not the overreaction.
Well, that's why you're seeing the separation between the I call it the civil war in the LGBT community. The LGB is trying to separate from the T and the Q. And I mean, the answer to this is not to roll back rights for gay people and bisexual people, like, oh, you can't get married. No, that's not the solution. Like that's not the problem.
Right.
The problem,
homophobia too, the softer side of that. I mean, I think that the homophobia that this is stoking is something that personally I don't think I've seen before.
Exactly. So
different
those
kind
are
of
the types
homophobia.
Yeah. Well, I think though, even just like traditional homophobia too is coming back into vogue because of, it's just everything. It all gets piled in together. There's the overreaction the other way. But I am hopeful at the same time, because there's always going to be, extremists on either side. I am hopeful that we can sort of hold back the overreaction and this, you call yourself a radical centrist, I believe, right? I have hope for the radical centrists.
Yeah, like I made that as a joke. I've been called out on that, and it's like, I don't know. People have different interpretations of radical centrism or centrism, what it means, both negative and positive. Like, I just like politically, it's like, oh, I'm pro-choice, but I also don't like vax mandates, and like that's already crossing the orthodoxy. So like, it's just crossing the orthodoxy. The answer to this mess is some left-wing positions, some right-wing positions, but you need logical consistency in them. That's the most important thing. And the harder left you go, the more of a meme and caricature you become of yourself. And the same thing on the right. It's the same sort of thing. And so like, I'm defining centrism as just normal, like just basic average stuff. Like, I wish I could start a political party and call it the bare minimum party. Like, I just want to put corrupt people in prison, fix potholes on the road, and just like basic stuff. Not even get to policies, just like basic things. Like, schools shouldn't schools should have playgrounds in them. Just very like obvious things that pretty much 90% of people would agree on, because we're so polarized now that, like, I don't know, we need to fight to find the center, because honestly, most Americans agree on 70 to 90% of things. Like,
Yeah,
that's
and I'm
really what it comes
reminded of
down to.
that. I'm reminded of that every time I go to the playground. I'm sure it's very similar for you, Natalia, because it's
Yeah.
so diverse where I live. It's like the whole swath of different skin tones, multiple languages being spoken. We probably all have a variety of different preferred, interests and political positions, but we're all at the park with our kids
Mhm.
hanging out, trying to have a good time. Hopefully we're, hopefully the kids are off playing and not nagging you or this or that. But that's,
It's also
I
just
do
being
believe.
in person. I mean, just being together in person is the antidote to all of this too.
Right. Yeah.
You also are not going to be as radical. I mean, with the exception of like, the marches and like some of the like Moms for Liberty events where people really show, their most intense colors. But generally people are, somewhat polite and restrained and are open to having even like a moderate.
Dialogue.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just good faith. Yeah, good faith dialogue. That's the most important thing. And we've really lost that nowadays for the most part. But I mean, the difference is we have individuals, we have groups that, we've looked at history, and we can now offer an alternative. Like, um, I've sort of been looking at history cyclically, um, recently, and one author that's sort of been sticking out to me was this British historian named John Glubb, and he talks about the 6 stages of empire. Specific, what's important for us is stage 6, the age of decadence, where we're all pessimistic, we have no faith in anything, there's no patriotism, where there's this despair, and we're just lost. And what's really unfortunate is every single empire that's gotten to that stage has collapsed. There's been no one to figure out a solution. And what we're experiencing now, especially when it comes to the youth not wanting to work, this has happened so many times in history over and over again. But we're in the unique position with our technology, with what we're doing right here, with people opening their eyes and realizing, oh, we're actually in a very important crossroads in history. Maybe for the first time, we can actually sort of change this. Maybe we could renew society. I don't know if the answer is another great awakening or something like that. I'm not even saying in a religious sense. I'm an agnostic, but the awakening of, yo, American ideas are really good, and they transcend cultures, they transcend race, they transcend. Everyone can agree on this, the Bill of Rights. And I guess that's just the culmination of, I guess for me, that's just what I go to. Let's just live in good faith and follow this. That's
Yeah. And I think that's a lot of what we're trying to do here at Restore Childhood, bring back that magic, bring back the simple, things that we can all come around. So
it
we
just reminded
appreciate.
me.
Yeah,
Sorry,
go
you
ahead.
just reminded me of the just, and this depresses me, the collapse and just sheer destruction of Disney. Like, part of childhood, at least for me, I don't know if it was the same for you, was those Disney movies. Oh my god,
Yes.
the oh, the Lion King, like, was like a life-changing movie. Practically, like, I learned so much, and you can still learn so much by watching the Lion
Yeah.
King. And I don't know, those movies were so impactful, and I don't know, the kids don't have that. They don't have, they don't have those magical stories like we used to anymore, and that's really sucks.
Well,
Hope.
it's funny that you bring that up because I've been watching a lot of the 90s sitcoms with my 9-year-old and also the 80s movies. I think we've kind of worked our way through most of the 80s movies, even some that are somewhat age inappropriate, but still are pretty mild compared to
Mhm.
what like children's fare is like today. But, just spending a year watching the entirety of Seinfeld, which, as my very wise 9-year-old observed, they're all like they're like big kids, like they're so immature, and Elaine is really a mean person, and this one is, Jerry's this, and it's really great. It's like very simple. The values, are pretty clear, even though like most of them don't really share them. I think that personally, like that's kind of an antidote to this era, not like watching more of like what Hollywood is churning out now, or Disney. And I do believe Disney will find its way. I mean, they have a long history.
If they won't, someone else will.
Yes, and that's what really gives me hope and faith, is that I do believe that, as you were describing, we have a unique position in history. Maybe it's just our hubris, you know.
Yeah.
Maybe we don't.
Maybe
but
we
I
have
do
main
think,
character syndrome. I don't know.
yes,
But
exactly.
the box office is democratic, right? So we're saying that America, 70% or more people probably believe similar things, or somewhere in the middle. Those are the people that Disney needs to appeal to. It's a publicly traded company. If people aren't going to the box office to see the woke, revision of whatever fairy tale,
They aren't. It was also just
Right.
objectively not well done,
Right.
regardless if they had the woke stuff or not. But
Right.
that's
Yeah,
another
that's
podcast
another
for
rabbit
another
hole.
day.
Right. I mean, even the New York Times has written about the fact that people aren't going to see these very woke movies and shows. There's just
Yeah.
there's no audience for them, because the first thing we were told when we started working on this documentary is tell stories, don't try to hammer home messages. And what they're trying to do is hammer home a message, and nobody wants to see entertainment for that. That's what grandma tries to do.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
anyway, so that's just,
It's like
so
we get lectured enough in school. I just want to go
Right.
watch a movie.
But do you think, I don't know if Stephanie has any more questions, but my final question is, tell me about Ron DeSantis. Would he make a good president? Has he been a good governor? What do you think about Ron DeSantis?
Oh my gosh, this is okay. So I like DeSantis as a governor. I mean, he definitely helped out teachers and first responders, emergency workers. He monetarily speaking, like he's like, hey, good job. When you see the optics in other states of nurses getting fired and things like that, we're getting a bonus and a thank you. And normally, okay, that sort of goes against my sort of economic beliefs, but he's an excellent governor. I think he took a really bad tactic at trying to take on Trump when he's not as charismatic as Trump. And I think, to sum it up, DeSantis should have run the campaign that Vivek Ramaswamy is currently running right now. I don't know. That, like, I see the points that DeSantis is trying to make, but no Republican who's tried to fight Trump in a one-on-one has ever come out the other side alive. Like, everyone gets
so
shredded.
like more of like an outsider, you're saying, like.
Okay, I like him. I just don't think I think he's going to run into the same problems that Trump had when Trump was president. Trump was going to put, he put people in advisor positions and cabinet positions that did not share his ideas on a surface level. Yeah, we're on your side, but I would say that the sands and the gears that were thrown into the Trump administration have been unprecedented in my life. And I think the same sort of thing will happen to DeSantis. He's also, I don't know, like, I don't like establishment figures. I like, at the point I'm in, I want to see a drastic reduction in, I want to see the elimination of the Department of Education. I want, there's a lot of government waste. There's a lot of government red tape. And I mean, just from we've seen from Twitter, hey, look, we fired 80% of the employees. Look, it's still running. We don't need, like, our government's just been growing and growing and growing. And I don't think that DeSantis is an answer to that, because he's trying to, sort of work his way through the system. I'm at the point where, like Vivek Ramaswamy said, like, we need a revolution of ideas in the United States. We don't need soft little changes here and there. We need a radical transformation of, let's stop taking from other people and let's also give back. It goes back to the Kennedy quote. Like, we need to ask ourselves what we can give back to our country, not our government, but our communities. That's the most important thing. How can we strengthen the friendships and relationships we have in our communities with our neighbors? Because when emergencies happen, I don't want to depend on FEMA. I want to depend on my neighbors, because they know what I need. I know what they need. And we can hold each other accountable much more than some top-down authority can.
That's great. It's kind of what you say, Stephanie. Like,
yeah, I mean, I'm more or less like disillusioned with the presidency. You know, there's some people I like what they say more than others. You know, Vivek Ramaswamy. I think Ron DeSantis. He says great things. You know, RFK on the Democrat side. Even Williamson, right? Isn't she one of the
Oh
other?
yeah, Marianne.
Yeah, Marianne Will. You know, I like some of the things that they're saying, but I'm just so you know, disillusioned with the presidency, and with that being the solution. Might our lives be better off if one or the other is in the short term? Yes. But I think long term, like you're saying, it's got to be a bottom up solution. I'm focused on the community. I'm focused on the kids, especially. And I think also our schools are a big key to this, both trying to, hold back some of the damage or try to lessen, I don't know what the proper word is, blunt some of the damage that's being
Yeah,
done
we need
to
to
in our
mitigate
public
the
schools.
damage.
Mitigate, that's the word I'm looking for, while also building up some alternatives, both giving parents the power. I think that's a big key, is like reminding parents like their instincts are right. You don't have to like question yourselves because the experts or the school are saying one thing. Believe in yourself, and same to the kids. So that's why I'm really looking forward to your book. You know, we're doing some stuff here I'm really excited about at Restore Childhood too. So where's the best place that people should look for your stuff? I know you're over on the app formerly known as Twitter. I'm not comfortable
Yes,
calling it X yet.
and
Anywhere else?
it sucks because I like birds. I have Instagram, YouTube, X, and Rumble. They're all the same, the Blytaga. So if you find me on Twitter, then I'm mostly on Twitter. I'm still going to call it that for now. Sometimes I call it X, but I'm mostly on that. Yeah, making
All right.
videos is difficult.
That's
But
great.
primarily on Twitter. That'd be the fastest way. If if a parent or anyone wants to contact me or anyone in general, that's the easiest and quickest way.
And we'll link that down below, as well as have our handles where you can find us on Twitter. We're also on Instagram. And of course, everything for Restore Childhood you can find at restorechildhood.com. And before we get out of here, if you haven't already, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you can get more interviews just like this. Thank you, Angel. And Natalia and I will see you guys back here next time.
Thanks for having me again.
Thank you so much.
All righty. Good stuff.
That was